Now I know thesis statement seems like something big and so difficult, and some of you have the attitude of it being so hard, but really they're so easy. Very simple concept. Let's cover it right now. So what do you already know about a thesis statement? You probably have an idea that it has to do with the rest of the paper. You know that it's required for a paper. Maybe some of you know that it actually goes in the first paragraph. As a matter of fact, it is the last sentence of the first paragraph, typically, and in this class, yes. If there's anything else that you know about a thesis statement, go ahead and be thinking about that. Have it processing in your mind so that you can be aware of what you've learned and what you need to work on. The thesis is the most important part of the paper because it asserts the controlling idea that is proved or supported in the body of the work. I want you to think about the word asserts. When you think of an assertive person, is that person somebody who sits in the back of the room and tries not to be noticed? No. An assertive person is outgoing, right? Somebody who voices their opinions and tries to always be involved. If you are going to assert a thesis statement, you can't be hiding in the back. You can't make these vague statements. You've got to be bold. So a thesis is an assertion. That means it's a stand on a particular topic. Take a stand. It's a statement that reveals a point that others might disagree with. Don't be scared of disagreement. Go for it. And an arguable position. I know some of you want to avoid confrontation, but really, you want to write about something that somebody would argue with you on, because you want to present these points in a way that you could convince somebody that you're right, and that is an argument. What's a thesis not? A thesis is not an observation. An observation is just, oh, this is something that's general, something that I've noticed, but everybody would notice it too. If everybody would notice it, why write about it in a paper? And it's not a purpose statement. You don't just state your topic, what you intend to do in the paper. That's not a thesis. That's definitely not taking a stand on anything. So the idea of, in this paper, I will, scratch it. Don't ever do that. Some of you who have struggled with your thesis statements in the past have been told that your thesis statements aren't really good, but you didn't understand why. Well, here are some characteristics of a bad thesis. Maybe you can figure out what it was that you did in the past. One is if it's too vague or broad, leading to an unwieldy paper. You don't want it to be so wide that you can't focus in on some main points to prove a specific argument. Or another way to think about it is if you could tear off your introduction and paste it on any number of other papers, or tear out your thesis statement and it would line up fine with another 20 or 100 papers, you need to get a little more narrow. You need it to be narrow enough that you can really focus. Second, if it's too narrow or factual and cannot be developed into a full paper, I mean, some things, they're just facts. We don't really have an argument to present, an argument to prove. You're not writing an encyclopedia. And at this point, book reports are old news, old school. You're writing an essay. You're presenting an argument where you present your ideas and show that you have these critical thinking skills, not encyclopedia skills. Third, a purpose statement, such as, in this paper I will, instead of assertions. This statement is so bad for so many reasons, and it's not just this, but if you say things like I believe, I claim, I want, it's all bad. For one, it's just an observation or a topic statement and not an assertion, so you're not being bold whatsoever. But also, first person is terrible in a thesis statement, because if you're gonna argue it, it has to be a statement that you can directly argue with. For example, if I were to say, I believe abortion is wrong. Think about this. Is that an opinion or a fact? Let me say it again. I believe abortion is wrong. Opinion or fact? Now, yes, I'm asking you a trick question. What I just said is a fact. I've stated what my opinion is, but the sentence itself is a fact because I believe abortion is wrong. Now, if you are going to present an argument, you could say abortion is wrong. That's what I want to prove to you. But if you state, I believe abortion is wrong, nobody can argue with what I believe. You can argue with the topic. You can argue with whether or not I'm right. But you can't tell me that I don't believe abortion is wrong. So saying things like I will, I think, I claim, I believe, those destroy the arguability of your paper. They take away so much and destroy any assertiveness that it would have had. So just take that off. By stating abortion is wrong as if it was a fact, I have not turned it into a fact. You can't turn an opinion into a fact. But I can state the fact that I believe or disbelieve something. Last one, neglect to take a stance on an issue. So observations instead of assertions. Always take a stand. Be bold. You're not really interested in reading things where people try to walk both sides of the fence pleasing everybody. You want to know the sides of the issue. You want to know which side you want to join. It's boring to read observations. You want to read the bold stuff. You're writing things for other people to read it. Be bold. Okay, so we know how to write a bad thesis now. So how do you get to the good thesis? Well, basically, you have to ask questions. Now, the thesis is not a question, by the way. People always ask me if a thesis statement can be a question, but just thinking about the punctuation marks, a statement is punctuated with a period, a question is punctuated with a question, a statement and question are opposites. So the thesis is not a question, but you have to ask a question to get to the thesis statement. Ideally, questions that start with should are pretty helpful. Something like, should Congress take a pay cut? You could answer and defend an argument for yes or for no. Of course, you need to state in full what your opinion is. In other words, yes, they should take a pay cut because, or no, they should not take a pay cut because. Okay, now, should the state take obese children from parents? Should that be allowed? What do you think? I would say the state should not be allowed to take obese children from parents. And then I would explain briefly. And then another one, should news cameras be allowed in the courtroom? Some of you are going to use this in your team assignment. Your thesis statement is the answer to the question. Remember, make an assertion. Answer the question with a single, complete, and specific sentence. And of course, as I've said many times and will say many more times, be bold. So the concept itself is simple. Say what you think and say it bold so that you can defend it. Prove that you're right. Now, even though it's kind of that simple, you should expect to be able to improve it. Don't expect to write one statement and stick with it, because you can change it. As you start the writing process, writing is a thinking process, and your thoughts might change or evolve, improve. And as they do, you should change your thesis to reflect what you're really writing about in the paper. Make the thesis more specific by answering how and why questions. So, this is what I think because. Of course, leave out the first person. Allow yourself to learn and reflect your learning in the thesis. Remember, the reason that you're writing papers is to learn. That's the whole reason that you write a paper in any class. It doesn't matter if it's an English class, a science class, a math class, a biology, or aviation. The purpose of writing is to give you a learning experience. Allow yourself to learn, and then reflect what you have learned through it by the thesis statement. That means you may have to go back and tweak it. That's why we're going to call it a working thesis. Your final thesis may actually be very different from your original rough thesis, and that is fine. Don't set in on something so much that you're glued to it and can't change it, because then you won't let yourself learn. This week you read Dan Quayle's speech, which originated from a response to the Rodney King trial and the riots that occurred after. And you also watched some video clips about what happened in those riots. Here's some questions to get you started as if you were going to write a paper about the Rodney King trial. Do you agree with the jury? Is the trial a reflection of our society? How does the Rodney King trial compare to the Casey Anthony trial, something a little more recent? Maybe you can think of some more questions. Following is some examples of thesis statements that could result from these questions. Bad thesis statement. The Rodney King trial is comparable to the Casey Anthony trial because both juries reached verdicts that angered the public. Wow. That would be an observation that anybody could come to. The general public didn't like the verdict. Wow. Do you really think you can prove that? Argue that? No. Good thesis statement. Both the trials of Rodney King and Casey Anthony demonstrate American juries' reluctance to follow their conscience. Now, trust me, that one you would get a few people that say, now wait a minute. It could just as easily be argued the other way, that it's proof that American juries do follow their conscience. So you decide which way you're going to argue, and that would be a thesis statement to get you going, and then you would give points to prove your case. If we were in a face-to-face class, at this point I would actually have you get into groups and write some thesis statements and then see if you can debate them. Although we're not in class, you can still use that visual, that need to debate, to determine whether or not the thesis statement that you write is challengeable. Is it something that you could actually take to court and argue, and the other side would have a case too? Or is it just too weak? Something that they would wonder why you're bringing this to court. Why are you trying to prove this? Nobody's going to argue it. So remember, especially, that a thesis statement needs to be an assertive statement. In other words, be bold. State something that you believe and care about enough to spend the next few pages proving it.